63%. That is the average increase in postprandial blood glucose that researchers observed when meals were prepared using highly refined vegetable oils compared to meals prepared with traditional cooking fats. Not a small bump. Not a rounding error. 63%. And the study was not conducted by some fringe alternative medicine group. It was published in the journal Lipids in Health and Disease, and the researchers could not believe their own data when they first ran the numbers. Neither could this channel. Here is what makes this truly infuriating. The oils responsible for that 63% spike are sitting in millions of kitchens right now. They are on the shelves of every grocery store in America. They are marketed with words like heart-healthy, light, and natural. Doctors do not warn against them. Dietitians recommend them by name. The American Heart Association has endorsed some of them for decades. And yet the peer-reviewed evidence connecting these refined industrial seed oils to inflammatory cascades, insulin resistance, and blood sugar dysregulation has been building in research journals for over 30 years, while almost nobody in mainstream medicine has said a single word about it to the people sitting in their waiting rooms. Today that silence ends. 7 cooking oils, ranked from damaging to most damaging, will be covered here, along with the precise biological mechanism each one uses to wreak blood sugar control, the research that proves it, and at the end, a clear 5-step protocol for replacing every one of them without spending a fortune. If even one of these oils is in the kitchen right now, this video may be the most important thing watched this week. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications because the pharmaceutical industry and the processed food industry are not going to send an alert when information like this surfaces. The only way to stay informed is to be part of this community. Hit that subscribe button before going any further. Number 7. Canola oil. Starting at number 7 is canola oil, and it may surprise some people to see it here at all, since it is perhaps the most aggressively marketed oil in the history of modern nutrition. The story told about canola oil is that it is low in saturated fat, high in monounsaturated fat, and therefore heart-healthy and diabetic-friendly. That story leaves out something critical about how this oil is actually made. Canola oil is derived from rapeseed through a process involving high heat, chemical solvents primarily hexane, deodorization, and bleaching. A 2011 study published in the journal Food Research International examined the fatty acid profile of commercially produced canola oil and found that the refining process converts a meaningful portion of the oil's omega-3 fatty acids into trans fatty acids, the very compounds that drive systemic inflammation and impair insulin receptor sensitivity. The trans fat content generated during industrial canola processing does not always appear on nutrition labels because it falls below the FDA's threshold for mandatory disclosure. That threshold is half a gram per serving. Use this oil daily at the volumes most home cooks use, and that hidden trans fat exposure accumulates significantly over time. A 2018 study from Temple University, published in Scientific Reports, examined canola oil's effects on metabolic function in animal models and found associations with increased insulin resistance markers and impaired glucose tolerance compared to control groups using other dietary fats. Researchers noted that the oxidative byproducts generated when canola oil is heated to typical cooking temperatures appeared to contribute to mitochondrial dysfunction in metabolic tissues. Mitochondrial dysfunction in liver and muscle cells is directly upstream of insulin resistance. When those cells cannot process energy efficiently, glucose accumulates in the bloodstream rather than being absorbed and used. That is elevated blood sugar, and canola oil's heating behavior appears to accelerate that process. The average senior cooking eggs in canola oil every morning may be unknowingly adding an inflammatory load that compounds over months and years, gradually degrading the insulin sensitivity that is already under pressure from age-related metabolic changes. That is number 7, and it gets considerably worse from here. Number 6, corn oil. Number 6 is corn oil, and the mechanism here is different from canola, but equally damaging to blood sugar regulation. Corn oil is extraordinarily high in omega-6 linoleic acid, comprising approximately 54 to 60% of its total fatty acid composition. That single fact should give every viewer serious pause. The human body evolved on a dietary ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids of roughly 2 to 1 or 4 to 1. Modern processed food diets, dominated by corn oil, soybean oil, and similar seed oils, push that ratio as high as 20 to 1 or even 30 to 1 in heavy users. A 2016 review, published in the journal Open Heart by researchers including Dr. James DiNicolantonio, examined the consequences of this ratio imbalance and documented its role in promoting systemic inflammation through arachidonic acid pathways. Arachidonic acid, the inflammatory metabolite produced from excess omega-6 consumption, directly impairs the function of pancreatic beta cells, which are the cells responsible for producing insulin. When beta cells are chronically inflamed, insulin output becomes erratic and blood glucose control deteriorates. A study in the journal Diabetes Care, published in 2019, examined dietary fat composition and its relationship to glycemic variability in adults with prediabetes. Higher omega-6 intake from refined vegetable oils was associated with greater postprandial glucose excursions, meaning larger blood sugar spikes after meals, compared to subjects consuming diets with lower omega-6 to omega-3 ratios. For someone already managing prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, that additional glycemic variability is not a minor inconvenience. It is additional stress on the vascular system, additional demand on the pancreas, and additional acceleration of the complications that make diabetes so destructive over time. If this information is making things click into place, if it is becoming clear why blood sugar numbers stay stubborn despite doing everything the doctor says, smash that like button right now. Not for this channel. For every senior who has been handed a pamphlet about healthy eating that recommended corn oil, while nobody mentioned what omega-6 overload does to the pancreas. Every like is a signal that this conversation matters. Consider the experience of a retired postal worker from rural Ohio named Gerald, 67 years old, who had been managing type 2 diabetes for 9 years. Gerald was meticulous. He checked his blood sugar twice daily, took his metformin without fail, exercised 3 mornings a week, and cooked almost everything at home from scratch because his doctor had told him restaurant food was too unpredictable. His A1C sat stubbornly at 8.1 despite everything he did. His fasting glucose ran between 140 and 160 on most mornings. His endocrinologist increased his medication twice in 3 years with minimal improvement. What nobody ever asked Gerald about was what he cooked with. His kitchen contained 2 large bottles of corn oil and 1 of canola. He used them interchangeably for everything: eggs, stir-fried vegetables, baked chicken, sautéed fish. When he learned about the research connecting refined seed oils to insulin resistance and began replacing them with avocado oil and occasional butter, his fasting glucose numbers began shifting within 6 weeks. By his next quarterly checkup, his A1C had dropped to 7.3. His doctor noted the improvement and asked what medication he had changed. Gerald told him he had changed nothing in his medication. He had changed his cooking oil. His doctor had no response to that. Gerald did not find this surprising anymore. Number 5. Sunflower oil. Number 5 is sunflower oil, which carries a similar omega-6 burden to corn oil, but adds an additional problem specific to its behavior under heat. High oleic sunflower oil varieties marketed as the more stable version are somewhat better, but standard sunflower oil, the kind found in most grocery store bottles, begins generating aldehydes and other toxic oxidation compounds at temperatures well within the range of normal stovetop cooking. A landmark 2015 study by Professor Martin Grootveld at De Montfort University in Leicester, England, examined the aldehydes generated when common cooking oils were heated to standard frying temperatures. Sunflower oil produced alarmingly high concentrations of aldehydes, including 4-hydroxynonenal, abbreviated 4-HNE, which the researchers described as genotoxic and cytotoxic at the levels generated during a single frying session. A 2019 study published in the journal Redox Biology identified 4-HNE as a direct inhibitor of the GLUT4 glucose transporter, which is the protein responsible for shuttling glucose from the bloodstream into muscle and fat cells in response to insulin. When 4-HNE impairs GLUT4 function, glucose cannot enter cells efficiently, even when insulin levels are adequate. The result is elevated blood glucose despite the pancreas doing its job correctly. This is a form of peripheral insulin resistance, created not by a metabolic disease process, but by a toxic byproduct of cooking oil heated in a pan. A 2020 review in the European Journal of Nutrition documented that dietary exposure to 4-HNE from repeatedly heated vegetable oils is associated with increased markers of oxidative stress and impaired glucose metabolism in older adults. The senior audience watching this channel is the precise demographic most vulnerable to this mechanism, both because age naturally reduces insulin sensitivity and because the effects of oxidative stress accumulate over a lifetime of exposure. Number 4. Safflower oil. Number 4 is safflower oil, which many viewers may not even recognize as a common oil because it hides inside salad dressings, mayonnaise, margarine blends, and packaged snack foods rather than sitting prominently on store shelves. Safflower oil contains the highest linoleic acid content of any commonly used cooking oil, approximately 75 to 80%, making its omega-6 load more extreme than corn or sunflower oil. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2016 examined the effects of high linoleic acid intake on inflammatory biomarkers in postmenopausal women over a 12-week intervention period. Participants consuming diets high in safflower oil showed significant increases in interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha, two inflammatory cytokines that are directly implicated in insulin resistance. The researchers noted that the inflammatory response appeared particularly pronounced in participants over 65, suggesting that aging amplifies the metabolic harm of excessive omega-6 consumption. The practical problem with safflower oil is its invisibility. Someone might faithfully avoid obvious cooking oils at home while consuming significant quantities through commercial salad dressings, store-bought hummus, packaged crackers, and deli foods. Reading ingredient labels for safflower oil specifically is a habit that most seniors have never been encouraged to develop, because most physicians have never mentioned it, because medical training has not historically addressed dietary oil quality as a relevant clinical variable. That is a gap with real consequences for everyone managing blood sugar. If a list is being made right now of which oils are in the kitchen and which packaged foods contain them, that list is the beginning of something important. Drop a comment below saying, "I am checking my labels," so that others in this community can see how many people this is resonating with. The community being built here is doing something the medical system has failed to do, sharing the research that people actually need. Number 3. Vegetable oil. Number 3 is the one simply labeled vegetable oil, and the reason it ranks this high is not just its chemical composition, but its deception. Vegetable oil is a marketing term that communicates nothing about what is actually inside the bottle. In practice, what is typically sold as generic vegetable oil in American supermarkets is a blend of soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil, and sometimes palm olein, in proportions that vary by brand and batch. The omega-6 content is high. The refining process is extensive. The stability under heat is poor, and the label tells the consumer almost none of this. A 2017 study published in PLOS One by researchers at the University of California, Riverside examined soybean oil specifically, which forms the largest component of most vegetable oil blends, and documented its effects on metabolic gene expression in animal models. The researchers found that soybean oil consumption was associated with dysregulation of genes controlling insulin signaling, lipid metabolism, and inflammatory response in hepatic tissue. The liver is the primary organ responsible for maintaining fasting blood glucose levels through a process called hepatic gluconeogenesis. When liver function is compromised by dietary inputs that disrupt metabolic gene expression, fasting blood sugar rises, and the typical diabetic patient is told their medication needs adjustment, rather than that their cooking oil may be working against them. There is no way to overstate how much money is made selling vegetable oil. It is one of the most profitable food commodities in the world. The food processing industry uses it in virtually every packaged product because it is cheap, shelf-stable, and bland. The agricultural industry benefits enormously from the soybean and corn crops that produce it. Recommending against it carries no financial benefit for anyone with institutional power. And so almost nobody with institutional power recommends against it, while the research documenting its harms accumulates quietly in journals that most patients will never read. This is a good moment to pause and mention something. Everything discussed about cooking oils and blood sugar so far only covers the inflammatory and oxidative mechanisms that operate during the day. There is a separate and critically underappreciated dimension to this story, involving what these oils do to overnight glucose regulation and morning fasting numbers. A comprehensive guide specifically on that topic, covering the overnight insulin cycle and how dietary fat composition affects dawn phenomenon, is available in the description below. It has helped thousands of members of this community understand why their morning numbers are often the hardest to control. The link is waiting there whenever it is needed. Number 2. Soybean oil. Number 2 is pure soybean oil on its own, which deserves separate treatment from generic vegetable oil because its research profile is particularly alarming and its prevalence in the food supply is nearly impossible to overstate. Soybean oil is the most consumed cooking oil in the United States by a significant margin. It is in restaurant fryers, fast food cooking, commercial baked goods, salad dressings, and most processed snack foods. Virtually every American consuming a standard diet is ingesting substantial quantities of soybean oil daily, whether they are aware of it or not. The 2017 University of California Riverside study mentioned earlier was followed by a 2020 study from the same research group, also published in the journal Endocrinology, which examined soybean oil's effects specifically on hypothalamic function. The hypothalamus is the region of the brain responsible for regulating metabolism, hunger signaling, and hormonal coordination of blood sugar. The researchers found that soybean oil consumption produced measurable changes in hypothalamic gene expression affecting oxytocin signaling, which has downstream effects on insulin secretion and glucose homeostasis. The lead researcher, Professor Francis Sladek, stated publicly that the findings suggested soybean oil may be affecting the brain in ways that compound its direct metabolic effects, creating a dual mechanism of harm operating simultaneously in neurological and endocrine tissue. A separate 2021 review, published in the journal Frontiers in Endocrinology, examined the relationship between linoleic acid intake, which soybean oil delivers in enormous quantities, and the progression of metabolic syndrome in aging populations. The review synthesized data from multiple longitudinal studies and concluded that high linoleic acid consumption was among the dietary factors most consistently associated with accelerated progression from prediabetes to type 2 diabetes in adults over 60. Most of the subjects in those studies had no idea how much soybean oil they were consuming, because most of it was invisible inside processed and restaurant foods they considered otherwise acceptable. Consider the experience of a woman named Dorothy, 72, a former elementary school librarian from suburban Atlanta, who had been diagnosed with prediabetes 4 years before finding this content. Dorothy ate what most people would consider an admirably careful diet. Salads daily with store-bought dressing, grilled chicken and fish, whole grain crackers with hummus, very little red meat, minimal sweets. Her fasting glucose stubbornly stayed between 115 and 130. Her physician told her she was doing well but needed to be more consistent. Dorothy found that response baffling because she felt she could not be more consistent. When Dorothy began reading ingredient labels specifically for soybean oil and its derivatives listed as partially hydrogenated soybean oil or soybean oil blend, she was stunned. Her salad dressing contained it as the primary ingredient. Her whole grain crackers contained it. Her store-bought hummus contained it. Her occasional mayonnaise contained it. She had been consuming soybean oil in enormous daily quantities while believing she was eating cleanly. When she eliminated it systematically, switching to olive oil and lemon juice for her salads, making hummus at home with sesame tahini and no added oil, choosing olive oil-based crackers, her fasting glucose dropped to between 98 and 110 within 2 months. She had changed nothing else. No new medication, no new exercise, no caloric restriction. She changed the oils in her food and her blood sugar responded accordingly. Number 1. Partially hydrogenated oils and industrial trans fats. Number 1, the most damaging category of cooking oil for blood sugar is partially hydrogenated oil and the industrial trans fats it contains. Partially hydrogenated oils were the processed food industry's solution to the problem of liquid vegetable oils going rancid during storage and transport. By forcing hydrogen atoms into the molecular structure of liquid oils under heat and pressure in the presence of a metal catalyst, food manufacturers created a solid or semi-solid fat that stayed shelf-stable essentially indefinitely. The resulting molecules are trans fatty acids, and their effects on metabolic function are as well documented as any dietary harm in the history of nutrition science. A landmark 1993 study by Dr. Walter Willett and colleagues at Harvard School of Public Health, published in The Lancet, first identified the relationship between trans fat intake and cardiovascular disease risk. Subsequent research expanded the picture dramatically. A 2001 study published in Diabetes Care examined trans fat intake and insulin sensitivity in a cohort of women followed over several years and found that higher trans fat consumption was significantly and independently associated with increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes. The mechanism involves trans fats directly incorporating into cell membrane phospholipids, altering membrane fluidity and rigidity in ways that impair the function of insulin receptors embedded in those membranes. When insulin receptors cannot flex and respond properly, the cellular machinery for glucose uptake breaks down regardless of how much insulin the pancreas is producing. A 2007 study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition by researchers at Brigham and Women's Hospital examined dietary fat type and markers of insulin resistance in a large prospective cohort and confirmed that trans fat intake remained one of the strongest dietary predictors of insulin resistance even after controlling for total calorie intake, obesity, physical activity, and other confounders. The dose-response relationship was clear. More trans fat consumed, more insulin resistance measured. The FDA officially banned partially hydrogenated oils from the United States food supply in 2018, declaring them not generally recognized as safe. This was a landmark decision that received widespread media attention and was rightly celebrated. However, there are 3 things the celebration missed that every viewer of this channel needs to know. First, food manufacturers were given until 2020, and then further extensions to comply, meaning partially hydrogenated oils remained legal in the food supply for years after the announcement. Second, the rule contains a regulatory loophole allowing products with less than half a gram of trans fat per serving to be labeled zero trans fat, meaning a person eating multiple servings of products across a day can accumulate several grams of trans fat while their labels show zero. Third, the products manufactured before the deadline were allowed to remain on shelves and in institutional food service indefinitely, meaning some long shelf life packaged foods and institutional cooking fats still in use today may legally contain partially hydrogenated oils that predate the prohibition. The most reliable way to know what is in the food is not to read the nutrition facts panel, which can legally say zero when the product contains trans fats. It is to read the ingredient list and look for the words partially hydrogenated. If those words appear anywhere in the ingredient list, the product contains industrial trans fats, regardless of what the nutrition label claims. This is the most important label reading habit that any senior managing blood sugar can develop, and almost nobody in the medical system has taken the time to explain it. Consider finally the experience of a retired industrial engineer from Michigan named Raymond, 69 years old, who had managed type 2 diabetes for 12 years with declining results despite multiple medication adjustments. Raymond's A1C had climbed from 7.8 to 9.1 over 4 years. He had added 2 medications, adjusted doses 3 times, and was told he might need insulin within 18 months if trends continued. Raymond was not eating packaged snacks or fast food. He was eating home-cooked meals prepared carefully. The problem was that his wife, who did the cooking, was using a commercial shortening that had been in their pantry for years, a product that predated the FDA trans fat prohibition and whose ingredient list clearly showed partially hydrogenated soybean and cottonseed oil. When Raymond and his wife identified this, replaced the shortening with grass-fed butter and avocado oil, and began reading every packaged ingredient label for partially hydrogenated oil, his metabolic trajectory reversed within a single quarter. His A1C dropped to 8.2 at his next test, then to 7.63 months after that. His endocrinologist reduced one of his medications for the first time in 4 years. Nobody had ever asked Raymond what fat he cooked with. Nobody had ever explained the ingredient label loophole. Nobody had mentioned that products labeled zero trans fat can legally contain trans fats. That conversation happened here, not in a physician's office, and Raymond believes it saved him from insulin dependence. Share this video right now with every senior managing blood sugar who might not know this information. A spouse, a neighbor, a sibling, a friend from church. The algorithm is not going to put this in front of them automatically. The food industry spends billions of dollars ensuring that comfortable, familiar products stay visible while research like this stays quiet. The only way this information reaches the people who need it is through direct sharing from people who care about them. That is this community. That is what is being built here. Now here is the 5-step action protocol for replacing these oils starting today. Step 1. Go to the kitchen right now and look at every bottle of cooking oil, every tub of shortening or margarine, every bottle of salad dressing, and every container of mayonnaise. Read the ingredient list, not the nutrition label. Look for the words canola oil, corn oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, vegetable oil, soybean oil, and most critically, partially hydrogenated anything. Make a list of every product that contains them. Step 2. Replace cooking oils immediately with these evidence-supported alternatives. Extra virgin olive oil for low to medium heat cooking and all cold applications including salad dressings. Avocado oil for high heat cooking, including stir-frying and searing. Grass-fed butter or ghee for moderate heat cooking where flavor compatibility allows. Coconut oil as an occasional option for specific culinary applications where its flavor profile suits the dish. Step 3. Make salad dressings at home. The single largest hidden source of refined seed oil in most home diets is commercial salad dressing. A base of extra virgin olive oil, acid from lemon or vinegar, Dijon mustard, garlic, and salt takes 90 seconds to prepare and eliminates the soybean oil exposure that most people consuming otherwise healthy salads never realize they are absorbing. Step 4. When purchasing any packaged food, read the ingredient list before the nutrition panel. The ingredient list cannot use the serving size manipulation that makes the nutrition panel misleading. If partially hydrogenated oil appears anywhere in the ingredient list, the product goes back on the shelf regardless of what the front label or the nutrition facts claim. Step 5. Give this protocol a minimum of 6 to 8 weeks of consistent implementation before evaluating results. Research suggests that the inflammatory markers associated with excess omega-6 and oxidized fat exposure require sustained dietary change over weeks, not days, to show meaningful reduction. Check fasting glucose at consistent times of day and track the numbers. The changes, for most people who implement this consistently, tend to be measurable. If this protocol is going to be started, drop a comment below saying "starting today" so this community can support each other. The comment section of this channel is one of the most informed and engaged communities of seniors, taking their health seriously anywhere on the internet, and that is because of the people who show up, engage, and share. Subscribe if you are not already subscribed. Like this video so that others who need this information can find it. And if there is one person in life who is struggling with blood sugar, despite doing everything that has been recommended, send this video to them directly. Not a link to the channel. This specific video. It may be the conversation their doctor has never had with them. There is one more critical piece of the puzzle that this video did not cover. The oils being replaced with are only as beneficial as the foods being cooked in them. And there are 7 specific foods that most seniors with diabetes eat regularly while believing they are healthy choices that spike blood sugar faster than a candy bar. Number 1 on that list will genuinely surprise most people watching. That video is queued up and ready. Watch it next.